All right, folks, so episode 5 of season 8 of Alone just aired last night. And in this video, I'm just gonna give you my thoughts on the episode. We're gonna do a little bit of a recap. Towards the end of this video, we're gonna talk about like the last couple of scenes where they showed me getting into some deer sign. But before we get into that, there's a whole bunch of other things that I wanna talk about. So before we get started, I just want to mention that the boys and I have been out here. We've made some really good progress on the shelter, as you can see. We've got the fireplace pretty much done. We've got the bunk in there and everything. I am putting together a video on the build for this. We still have some things to do, but be looking for a complete, start to finish video on the shelter build here coming up. So right off the bat in the opening scenes, you see me tightening up my belt. So this is about 3 weeks in or so. And by that time, I estimate, and I have no way to really know this, but I estimate that I was already back down to my normal 160-pound range. When I first went in, I went in at about 180 pounds. So I had gained about 20 pounds to go into this. And I started, it's very difficult for me to gain weight. I'm an active guy, I have a high metabolism. And so from the very beginning, when I was first contacted about going on this show, I started trying to gain weight. And that was well before I knew for certain that I was going to be on the show. I figured that there was a good chance I was going on it, and I knew that I needed all the time that I could get to prep for this thing. And so basically from the very, very beginning, I treated preparing for this like it was my job. I started trying to gain weight. I started practicing the skills that I wasn't proficient in, things like that. By the time it was around week 3 or so, I had already lost all of the weight that I had gained. And so, at this point, it's if I don't start finding food, I'm starting into that deficit that just drives people out of this competition. And so I started really concentrating a lot on fishing. But as you saw, and as you heard me talking about, the fishing there on that lake was just incredibly, incredibly difficult. And it seems like, from what we're seeing, it seems like everybody else is having similar type of situation with the fishing. It's just not an easy place to find food. Now, I did make a landing net, and the way the net making technique that I use can be used in a pretty confined area. And so you see me sitting out in front of my shelter working on it. But a lot of that stuff I did actually inside the shelter at night when it was dark, because you don't have to have it spread out like you do with just the method where you do the overhand knots. The net making method I was using was actually like the real net needle, net weaving making, the way nets have been made for thousands and thousands of years. And so if you're interested, I'll do a video. I'm gonna try to have it out next week where I show you how to do that. We'll recreate that landing net. All right, so moving on, we'll talk a little bit about what we saw of Michelle. And the first thing right out of the gate, she's eating snails. And I couldn't really tell from the video, but it looked like she had relatively big snails. I had snails on my site, but they were super tiny. They were maybe 3 millimeters, just really small little things. And so it wouldn't have been worth my time to try to collect those things. And honestly, I never even thought about it. So one of the things that she talks about, and her and Nikki talked about it in the post-show interview, was eating things or doing things out there that you would never really consider doing at any other time. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, you will consider eating things that would disgust most people, because, I mean, you literally are starving. Your body is consuming itself. And most people, most of the viewers that are watching this show, really, they don't quite understand. They can't understand what that's like. And so when you're talking going, days and days without eating anything, when you start talking about that type of hunger, and when that goes on for weeks at a time, that's a different level of hunger. That's not just in your belly. I mean, you feel that in your entire body. You feel that in your bones. And that type of hunger, it'll make you do things that you've never considered before. In this episode, we see both Michelle and Biko making fish traps. I really want to see someone be successful with a fish trap. It's a really cool primitive technique, but they haven't really worked out in past seasons. I've used fish traps and I have had some success with them, but it's in very specific type of situations. The areas that I've had best success with fish traps or basket traps like that is, first of all, I was making a big trap, which takes a lot of work. And then secondly, it was in like a warm water fishery where you have things like bluegill and bass and things like that. I've never actually tried them in a cold water system like this. And so I wouldn't even know where to begin to try to set those things for maximum effectiveness. I think if we see, maybe in future seasons, if we see another season on a river where you have small side channels and you could create a weir and then use a big fish basket in conjunction with that weir, I think that could be very, very effective. So Michelle is in a tough spot. I mean, I understand the predicament she's in very well. She has a small frame. She doesn't have a lot of weight to lose, and I'm in the same situation. I understand that. And this area is just not an easy place to find food. The fishing's tough. There are grouse around, but they're very, very flighty. Normally with rough grouse and spruce grouse, a lot of times they'll let you approach pretty closely. But I think what Michelle was seeing, and then certainly what I was seeing, is they're just not that tolerant of people getting close to them. And so it's tough to get a shot at them. And so, in the end, I think Michelle ended up making the right call. When people sitting at home, they will judge everything that they see on the television. And I understand that, that's just human nature. But she knows her body better than anyone else. And so, when she made the call to make that call, I think she did the right thing. It's tough to make that decision, and she didn't want to push her body beyond what she felt she could recover easily from. And I totally get that, and I totally respect that. So good for you, Michelle. And it sounds like she took away from this experience some valuable lessons. And I think anyone that goes out there for an extended period of time, I think it's inevitable that you're going to learn things about yourself that you may not have known previously. So just like everybody else, Matt seems to be having a tough time with the fishing. He does catch, in this episode, he does catch a small trout on his hand line. As far as the calories goes, there's not a lot in a fish like that, but as I've said before, every little bit counts. But the big benefit of catching something like that is that it's a huge mental boost. When you haven't had any meat for 4, 5, 6 days, a week, 2 weeks, something like that just helps to keep your spirits up a little bit. And Matt seems to be going through, having some internal conflicts, trying to, realizing the importance of staying positive, but then also having to deal with failures in terms of fishing. And that's something we were all having to deal with. But at the same time, he understands how important it is to be in that, as he says, that survival mindset, to be present, to deal with the situation that you have to deal with, to maintain a positive attitude. But even though you realize that when you're out there in that situation and things aren't going as well as they could, you're literally starving. You have a tremendous amount of time with just your thoughts. And it's very difficult to not get inside your own head. But Matt eventually comes to the conclusion that even at the risk of the ridicule that he knows is going to come his way, he would rather be with his family. And I absolutely respect that. I think that people's judgment may have been weighing pretty heavily on Matt. And it's something that is easy to dwell on because you know it's coming. I mean, everyone that's on this show, it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter if you win it, doesn't matter if you tap out on day one. People are going to judge what you do. There's no way to escape that criticism. And so I would just advise anybody, whether you're on this show or just in life in general, to don't even bother. People are going to judge, just let them do it. Finally, after almost 3 weeks of being there, I finally get into a little bit of fresh deer sign. And there's not a lot. I mean, it was one of the things that I said in there was like, I think there's 3 deer, maybe 2 on this whole place. And so I was being very, very cautious. I found what looked to be the sign of just a very, very small handful of deer. And I did not want to pressure those deer and run them out of the area. And so when you're in a situation like that, you really have to make the call, like, do you push it and risk blowing those deer out, or do you leave and come back another time when the odds may be a little bit better in your favor? And so when I first found that deer sign, that's what I did. I found the sign. I didn't feel like the conditions were absolutely perfect. I didn't feel like the odds were in my favor, and so I just made a mental note of trying to figure out where exactly I was so I could come back to that spot. And then I just went back to camp and decided to come back another day when I felt like I had a better chance at those deer. Went back, did some more fishing, didn't catch anything. The fishing, like I said, was incredibly tough by that time. But I eventually went back and found some more fresh deer sign. If you have enough experience in the woods and deer hunting and with tracking and reading sign, you can interpret pretty accurately how fresh sign is. And so the sign that I was seeing in those last few moments of episode 5 was very fresh. Those deer had just been there. So the type of hunting that I was doing is still hunting. It's probably, especially with a longbow or a recurve, it's probably the most difficult style of hunting that you could do. But in this particular situation, I felt like it was going to be the most productive. When I first found that fresh deer sign, I had actually considered building a tree stand where I found that sign. But with so few deer and just the sign being in such a small area, I felt like just the disturbance that would have caused being there, cutting branches, back and forth, I felt like that would just run those deer out of that spot. And so when I found that first fresh deer sign, it was very, very encouraging. I was very excited to find that. But I decided to back out and come back at a time when I felt like the odds were more in my favor because I didn't want to pressure those deer out. I didn't want to run them out because literally I had been there for all that time and I had seen very, very, very little deer sign. And that was the best sign that I had seen the whole time I was there, and I did not want to mess it up. Still hunting is basically moving through the woods very methodically, very slowly, looking and listening and trying to detect an animal before they detect you. To still hunt successfully, you have to be present. You have to be aware of what's going on around you. And the type of awareness that I'm talking about, this is something that most people never really get to because they live in a world where there's so much going on. You know, we're constantly distracted by everything. There's not a lot of room for error there. There's very little forgiveness. If you make a mistake, when there's an animal close by, it's probably over. Even if it's not something that you do, or if it's just a stray wind, or if you inadvertently step on a stick or something like that, make the wrong noise, make the wrong move at the wrong time. There's just no room for mistakes. And so it is very difficult. It's incredibly difficult to kill a deer or any other big game with those methods. But towards the end of the episode, you see I do find a deer, and you see me take a shot. But when we shoot a bow and arrow, when that arrow leaves, we have our control over the situation ends there. We have no control once that arrow leaves the bow. So that's where they leave us on episode 5. I have no idea what they're going to show on episode 6. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. But we'll see. We'll see next Thursday. And I'll have another video coming up next Thursday, 4 p.m. Pacific, so whatever that is for the rest of the time zones. And I'll probably recreate that landing net. I'll show you the netting techniques. I'll show you how to carve a net needle and all of that stuff. That's one of those techniques that I practiced well before I ever went out there. I actually learned the ancient method of net making with a needle and everything, and it turned out very, very nice. So I'll show you guys how to do that on the next video. And if you're not subscribed, go ahead and do that, and we will see you next Thursday. Alone, Season 8, Episode 6 on the History Channel. See ya.